Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be starting shortly. We are beginning to receive some of the attendees for the virtual town hall. As they begin to populate the screen, we will proceed. We're waiting on our
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be starting
mayor,
shortly. We are beginning to receive some of the
the honorable mayor and members of the council who are showing, as well as the city manager. We should be started within the next 5 or 10 minutes. So bear with us. This is going to be a very informative town hall, and we hope that you're able to get as much out of it as the consultant teams and the city staff have put into it for Laredo's water future. So just bear with us for just a few more minutes. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Laredo Water 50-year Master Plan Virtual Town Hall. This is the first in a series of town halls that we will be having to lay out the 50-year water and wastewater master plans. We have come to a point in the studies that we are taking in additional community input and are displaying what work has been done to date. And so what I'd like to do first and foremost is cover a few things, some introductions of some folks who have joined us today, some housekeeping items, and a few other things. So let's get started. Thank you again for everyone joining us. At this moment, if I could, I'd like to recognize the Honorable Council Member Alyssa Ciarroa, who has joined us. Ms. Ciarroa, if you have a minute, could you open up your microphone for us and say hello? I believe the council member has dropped off inadvertently, so if you see her come back on, we will recognize her as well. Additionally, tonight joining us are members of the city management staff. Assistant City Manager Riazul Mia has joined us. Riazul, would you like to say hello and say a few words?
Good afternoon. This is Riazul Mia, one of the Assistant City Manager. Unfortunately, City Manager
audio,
is.
Mr. Mia.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Okay.
City Manager. Unfortunately, Mr. Eads is busy in some meetings, so he told me to go ahead and start. So thank you for joining us on this important town hall for the future of our water and wastewater. And with that, I know everybody is busy, but thank you for putting your little bit of time on this. This is most important for our community's future. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Mia. Additionally, joining us today are some members of the city utilities staff that have been pushing this project forward and working diligently to present this master plan. If I could have Arturo Garcia, please introduce yourself and say a few words.
Good afternoon, Gene. Thank you very much for that introduction. I'd like to welcome everyone that's here today. This is a critical step in our master planning process. I think we need customer input to sharpen the direction and the target that we need to hit in the future. So customer input is going to be very critical, and it's a critical element of this master plan. Thank you.
Mike Rogers, the Assistant Utilities Director, has joined us as well. Mike?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I want to say thanks for participating in this. I think it'll help us learn a lot about and get some ideas and give us a chance to show you what the future looks like.
And joining us as well is Ramon Chavez, the City Engineer. At this time, I'd like to introduce the consultant teams that have been working on this. Back in 2019, the city began to look for engineering firms that could present a master plan to the city of Laredo, do a review of all the existing master plans. And they had selected Lockwood, Andrews, and Newnham to lead the master plan for the water side, and Ardura, the team that is leading the wastewater side. At this time, I'd like to introduce Tom Ray with LAN and have him introduce his team.
All right. Thank you very much, Gene. Yes, it'd be my pleasure to do that. We have speaking today, and we have actually a number more than this on our team, and a number of important sub-consultants as well that are helping us with this very important project. Charles Shoemate, who you'll be hearing from pretty shortly, is a longtime engineer, project manager, senior with LAN. He is
Next
responsible.
slide, Arduras. Gustavo,
And
please. Yeah.
hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, Tom,
Okay.
we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right. So I was on Charles, and then also is Lisa Latoux, who is helping us with the CIP portion of this, the capital cost of projects and getting those lined up for when by priority and need. And finally, a person that you may recognize, Tom Mounts, has worked for the city a number of times in the past, and he has helped lead the water supply and water supply alternatives that we'll be talking about. Thanks, Gene.
Thanks, Tom. And did we get the chance to introduce Russ Ford? I know Russ is on the team as well, and he's present. Okay, good. My audio was a little bad there for a second. I didn't hear if we had introduced
Gene,
Russ. I know.
Let me introduce myself. I'm Russ Ford with Lockwood Andrews Newnham. What I will tell you about this project, it is an innovative approach, and we give great credit to the city staff, not only utilities, but also the city management, for taking an overall encompassing look at your water needs for the next 50 years. And in all fairness, Gene, this thing eclipses any water master plan that we've ever done in the past. It's more extensive, it's more comprehensive, and I think it's going to be greatly to the benefit of the city.
Thanks, Russ. And at this time, I also want to introduce the team that is leading the wastewater side, the Ardura team. Chris, do you want to introduce your team?
Yeah, sure. So real quick, Chris Canonico here. Again, Dan Leindecker, Hector Pena, and Ignacio Hinojosa are our team working, and you'll hear from Hector and Ignacio today. Again, we're here to help answer questions and push the wastewater side forward for the next year. So thanks, Gene.
Okay, fantastic. And so I want to take care of a couple housekeeping items as we go through this so that we can kind of make sure that we get to hear everybody's voice on this. We are broadcasting this live on Facebook, and we are going to be monitoring those streams. I know the city is sharing it on their Facebook page as well. If you want to make comment, if you want to jump in, you can at laredowater.org and register still to come in as an attendee. We do have some folks who are in attendance today. If you do want to do a Q&A, please register. We'd love to get those questions through the webinar. And again, we will be monitoring all the chats for comments and questions so that we can present those to the panelists and hopefully get all your questions answered. At the tail end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A and have the ability to ask questions of the panelists, members of council, if present, and city management as well. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Lockwood Andrews and Newnham, Dom Ray and his team, as they present the water master plan presentation at this point.
This is Charles Shoemate with LAN. Welcome. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. If you're not familiar with the water master planning process or what a master plan may do for you, let's talk about that in just a moment. Let's go on to the next slide. There we go. We'll talk a little about the major components of a master plan. I'm specifically going to talk about the hydraulic modeling effort, and then all of the speakers this evening are going to talk about status of and progress on their tasks. Let's go on to the next slide. So some of the goals of the master plan. we always want to look at infrastructure that's going to be required to serve growth in the future. It also takes a look at, current needs and works to address those. All that's done building on previous work and, in coordination with city staff and their knowledge of the system. A key of master planning, looks at the potential for emergencies, vulnerabilities in the system, possible interruptions of supply, those kind of things. You always have to be mindful too of the cost of things and just potential financial impacts and financing requirements of projects. And of course, always want to ensure that the plan represents Laredo's people and community. A little background on the city system and the current effort. The system's originated or had its beginnings about 140 years ago now. It's a primary consideration, I guess, that the Rio Grande River is essentially the supply for the city. Groundwater gets only pretty limited use because it's limited both in quantity and in quality. The current master planning effort goes back to 2011 was the last published master plan, I believe. The 2015 update is not doesn't include all the aspects of a master plan, but it was a major update of the modeling efforts. And then emphasized in the current planning is that we make use of those Water Development Board planning projections for both population and future water demand. And if you're not aware, Laredo is in Region M of the state's planning effort. So from a really high level view of typical water system, you've got an intake. In this case, the source is the river. You go through the treatment and disinfection processes out to the system where, see at the bottom there, the additional pumps. You may have booster pumping stations or additional booster pump capacity out in the system to boost pressure to those homes and businesses. And then at the top there, you may also have additional storage out in the system. And next slide. So in the city system today, and these numbers have changed, in recent years with the El Pico treatment plant coming into service, but the city now operates 2 surface water treatment plants. There are 8 booster pump stations, 9 elevated storage tanks, and with the 2 treatment plant service areas and 8 booster pump station service areas, there are a total of 10. And part of what helps define those service areas are some PRVs out in the system, and isolation valves also help form boundaries for those service areas. And then finally, just the piping out in the system, there's more than 1,000 miles of water lines that range in size from 2 inches up to 60-inch transmission mains. When I start talking about hydraulic modeling, I'd often start with population and water demand, but Tom is going to pick that up here in a little bit as he talks about planning for the future more and those population and water demand projections and that need for additional water supplies. But really all a computer or a water model is a computer simulation of those that infrastructure out in the system, both what you see above ground and what you don't see with the water lines underground. It's a tool to identify needs or it's kind of a what if tool many times. If there's a disruption in supply or a break in a line or just not enough capacity somewhere, and then allows you to test potential improvements. Whatever the engineer can brainstorm or sees a need for. With storage, it helps you locate where in the system it needs to be and how much storage. With pumps, it's about capacity and their operating or performance requirements. How much pressure do they need to provide? With water lines, again, it can be connecting from point A to point B and how large that line needs to be. And then operational changes can come out of the modeling effort as well. Knowing when to turn pumps on and off, how they're controlled by levels in tanks or pressures out in the system, those kind of things. And then finally, with those improvements or alternatives that are identified, assigning or estimating costs for those and selecting among those alternatives to provide, better or best alternatives both for today and to operate well into the future. And next slide. So kind of, how did we begin? Steps we've been through. Where are we now? Where are we going? So, as I've mentioned, that 2015 model update formed the basis for where our work began. It did take some updates, both in terms of addressing development in the system in the last 5 to 6 years. So adding some pipes in those developments, as well as new demand in the model. I mentioned changes that have come about with El Pico coming into service. So there were booster pump stations in the model that no longer need to function. A major step or task then in the overall process is verifying that model, just making sure that model results match what you see out in the system day to day. And you do that just by looking at flows and pressures in the system, comparing SCADA data for tank levels with model results. And a big part of getting those things to work and come into agreement is just getting pump controls right. Once you have a verified model, then you take that and apply it to the existing system. The way the system operates day to day and peak days especially, and all of its shortcomings potentially. And what we see agrees with what city staff tells us about needs out in the system, from growth in South Laredo, just challenges at times to refill storage. And another thing that we look at as well is just, are there ways we can simplify operation or make things more efficient? And then finally, of course, again, kind of back to cost, want to be able to identify those efficient and affordable improvements. So what does this all look like when we're finished? Well, the report, the final master plan document, really just kind of documents those things we've been talking about. It goes back to kind of where we started and the development of the model, bringing it up to date, the needs that are identified in the existing system with both capacity and pressure, storage, you could add to that list as well. Then a documentation of those proposed capital improvements, and that comparison of alternatives, what's won out, what seemed to be the best solutions to the needs, both short-term and long-term. And then finally, again, developing those conceptual or planning level costs. That's a key part, of course, of the comparison of those alternatives. And you want things to be both dynamic and updatable and actionable, things that city staff can go then and begin to implement. So next slide. So this is just a preview of how things are beginning to look now. As far as major projects, something that's been on the radar for a while, we've referred to as an outer loop. That's a large diameter transmission line that extends what went into service with the El Pico treatment plant and taking its water to the east, and eventually that line will turn south. I believe it ends now about Highway 35, and extending that on to supply growing areas of the system and where there's a need today. Likelihood of always some potential plan improvements. Those are things always in the city CIP. So meshing those with model results and getting into agreement about priorities for those, and then also pump station improvements, and some of that's about operation, and some of it's really getting a better handle on and control of getting enough supply to booster pump station facilities where it's needed. And I believe that brings me to the point then I hand it back to Tom, who's going to talk about water supply alternatives.
Okay, Charles, thank you. I appreciate that. I've got some help. I've got some help today from Tom Mounts, and Tom, like I mentioned earlier, has done a lot of work on a number of water supply alternatives. Also on our panel is Mike Thornhill of the Thornhill Group. He is a groundwater hydrologist. And so when we get to talking about the groundwater alternatives that we've looked at, Mike will be available to help us answer questions and get through that with the information you need to know about groundwater alternatives. As Russ mentioned, the Laredo, and I apologize, Russ, for not recognizing you. It's that's a major slip up, but Russ is very valuable to our team. But as he mentioned, the Laredo integrated water master plan goes beyond the typical standard master plan in that it does look at water demands out in the future that will be needed to meet the growth of Laredo, as well as an alternative to look at what happens if Laredo were to lose its primary water source, which is the Rio Grande. So we'll be talking about that in terms of the alternatives. And let's move on down to the next slide, which gives you a little bit of background about where we got our information. What we were using for population and water demand is information from the Region M water supply plan. That's the regional plan for this area. It is part of a overall statewide effort that's been in place since the mid-90s. The city, RIA, and others are actively, RIA is actually a member of the Region M Water Planning Group. And he has had great input in the alternatives that were included in the plan, has also looked over some of these numbers that we'll be presenting in just a minute. We did gather information from existing water supply sources, the documentation there, the references there as well. We looked at projected demands in two categories, and we'll speak a lot about this over the next couple of slides. We looked at the supplemental water supply goals for the city. That's what amount of additional water supply is needed by the city to meet its growth needs through the year 2070. So a 50-year projection of the growth of the city, which is very typical, very standard practice. Not many cities achieve that as well as Laredo, but that's the supplemental supply goal that we'll be looking at. And then the other is emergency supplies. If the city of Laredo loses its main source of supply at the Rio Grande, what sources could they call on to make it through an interim need until the Rio Grande is reestablished? So looking at that, we've identified some alternatives. I want to go through those with you now. If you'll take the next slide, please. Okay, this is the population demands straight out of the Region M plan. Gene and his team have done a very good job of illustrating the growth that we anticipate for Laredo, and it's significant. We are starting here in 2020 with 300,000, and then moving out to 2070, you see it's well over 600,000. So it's going to double in population growth by the year 2070, again, out of the Region M plan. Next slide, please. All right, this is kind of a busy slide, and I'll try to walk you through it, but it's important to know that is there enough water supply available to meet these significant growth that is going on for the city of Laredo? And the answer is that the city has done a great job of building a current supply that is well in surplus of current needs. And down, and I'm not sure if my cursor won't work. Let's go down to the water supplies that next to the bottom line, that 61,827, that's in acre feet. In just a minute, we'll explain acre feet. And the other term I'll use for water supply is million gallons per day, but we'll talk about those in just a minute. Just keep in mind that 61,000, almost 62,000 acre feet is the amount of current water supply that the city has accumulated. the city's current demand for water supply, there we go, that 43, almost 44,000 acre feet is the current demand. Then if we look, remember the growth chart we just looked at, as growth occurs over the decades out to 2070, that surplus water supply begins to be used. And so when you get out to the growth, the doubling of the population by 2070, you'll see there's a need for an additional 21,000 acre feet. Now that 21,000 acre feet is about 19 million gallons a day. And I'll talk more about million gallons a day in just a minute. Next slide. This graph shows it a little better as far as how much water the city has currently and the steady progressive need for that water with population growth over time. And there's that 21,000 additional needed in 2070. Important is just where he was pointing. Go back, Gustavo, to that point. That line, that's zero. That's where we run out of surplus water unless additional supplemental water supply is identified and brought online by that time. All right, next slide. Continue to want to emphasize this. It's important that you know we're looking at two supply goals. One is emergency supplies, a loss of the Rio Grande. The other is supplemental supplies to meet that additional water supply needed for the growth beyond the year 2040. Next slide. Here it is again, the current supplies for you. That's almost 62,000 acre feet. That is 55 million gallons a day, more or less. And that should meet our needs, the city's needs through 2040. And then if you look down, Laredo is also preparing for those future growths beyond 2040, as well as emergency outages. The graphic on the right, Gene and his team put together to give you an idea of how much water is in an acre foot. It's a term we use for raw water supply because it's a big number. It's a lot of gallons. As you see it there, it's 326,000 gallons. It's almost 327,000 gallons. So it's a big number. It's a lot of water. We turn to that when we're talking about how much supply could come from a lake, how much supply could come from groundwater. Then when we start talking about a treatment plant, we usually revert to million gallons a day. All right, let's move on. Again, I want to make a point of the supplemental and emergency, but this time identify the amounts, the target amounts of supply goals we're trying to meet for each of those categories. Supplemental water supply is at 22,000 acre feet per year or 20 MGD. And then the emergency water supply goal that we're using, it's explained and developed in the report as to why we're using that number, is about 33.5 MGD. And you'll see those numbers in just a minute as we go through some of the alternatives. All right, next slide. Water supply alternatives to meet those two goals. Over in the right-hand box, that captures the ones that we've looked at in some detail. It does not capture all of the alternatives that have been looked at in terms of possibilities. And the report, when it's completed, is going to have a number of others referenced, but none to the detail that these will be presented. So we want to make a point of going through these with you, make sure you kind of get a good understanding of what we're looking at. The water supply alternatives that importantly can function as either supplemental supplies to help with that future growth or as emergency supplies to help with the emergency need that we talked about. So we're going to be looking at Lake Casablanca. Tom Mounts is going to help me with that. Groundwater, we've got, there we go. I'm just going to mention groundwater. We classified as local, which is Webb County, And then we have a couple of imported supplies where we go out to Demet County, even Valverde County, brackish groundwater, which is in the county. Talk about a reuse project that the city has worked on and has in the Region M plan. Aquifer storage and recovery we'll talk about. And then the kind of the base of the city's water rights is the Rio Grande. So there is this ongoing need and effort by the city to add additional water rights from the Rio Grande. Now we move on. Tom Mounts is really the expert on Lake Casablanca. I think he's looked at it at least a couple of times, maybe more. But Tom, if your mic is on, you want to.
I'm ready.
All right.
Thank you, Tom. Lake Casablanca, big body of water, right next to Laredo. It was built in the 1950s by Webb County. And it has been evaluated as a potential water supply or emergency supply source for many years. So we went back as part of this effort to revisit those earlier studies and prepared a technical memo that is part of the overall master plan. The lake has been offered as one option for a direct emergency supply. However, as you'll see in a minute when we go through the numbers, that use is very, very limited. It's also been suggested as a potential storage facility for reuse water, and that is something to be evaluated as part of what this study is looking at for emergency and supplemental uses. As I said, the lake was built back in the 1950s. It has an uncontrolled spillway. According to the permit that the county received when they built the dam and the lake, it has an approximate surface area of about 1,680 square acres, and that translates to around 20,000 acre feet of storage, or that's what was estimated when it was built. And at that time, it was estimated that there's a maximum depth of 36 feet based on the current topography at the time. Back in 2007, I was working on a dam rehab for the county, and we looked at the lake and did some initial soundings. We found that the surface area is still approximately the same with some better topography, but that the lake volume was significantly less because the maximum depth that we found from the soundings near the dam is considerably less than the original 36 feet. There's been siltation and other runoff related sediment that has infilled into the dam. And so at that time, we estimated that the available acre feet was somewhere around 11,000 acre feet. In this study, we updated that information to the extent that we could with new aerial topography LIDAR that has been prepared by the state, and relooked at the volume based on that, and looked at a couple of other factors. We found that the volume is around that same 11,000 acre feet that we estimated earlier based on the data that we have. But as you can see, that's less than the volumes that Tom just mentioned as needs on a daily basis or as an emergency basis. We also looked at evaporation rates, and this is significant for consideration of use of Lake Casablanca. Obviously, desert type terrain, temperature-wise, the state records over the last 20 years, the average rainfall has been between 20 and 21 inches of rainfall per year on average. That can be compared to an average evaporation rate from the lake of in excess of 40 inches a year. And so you can see it's not being replenished by rainfall alone. It is being replenished by some groundwater and other sources, but by rainfall alone, it's not able to make up that difference that it's receiving every year. And that's one reason why the lake level usually is below that spillway elevation. We looked at how, if they dredge the lake, and this again is an update from some of the information we did back in 2007, if they were to dredge the lake, if the county or the city were to go together and dredge the lake, would that provide additional capacity? And as we see above here on the slide, the maximum capacity is still only around 20 acre feet, which doesn't give us much capacity on a daily basis. If we suck out 20,000 acre feet one day, then we don't have it the next day. But we looked at the cost of dredging, and we found that it varies widely, but in an area like this, for a lake with the sediment types that we have, the cost would be anywhere from $2 to $8 per cubic yard that you remove. And so we're talking into the 5 or 6 million to remove that sediment that's accumulated back to the original size of the lake, which again is still somewhat inadequate. So we found that there is some potential use for the lake, but it is very, very limited and will not meet the demand that is being required at this time.
Tom, I appreciate it, Tom. And Tom will be around to answer questions about Lake Casablanca or other alternatives in just a moment. And we'll be looking at in a moment as well a comparison of how Lake Casablanca compares to some of the alternatives we've looked at. Next slide, please. This is the first of several groundwater alternatives that we looked at. Again, Mike Thornhill with the Thornhill Group is on the panel. And Mike, if you would, I'm going to move pretty quickly through these alternatives now and try to catch up some time. But Mike, if I leave something out, you see a significant point that needs to be made, please chime in. I would appreciate it. We've looked at this one pretty closely. This is a groundwater supply. It's in the Carrizo-Wilcox, which is a aquifer. It's an underground storage of water, and it's a storage of water that is of decent quality. That still needs to be further evaluated, but also it should have decent water supply quantity, and we're still looking at that. But preliminarily, for the purposes of this master plan, we think it has two aspects: significant water supply, about 23 million gallons a day, and the ability to develop up on a peaking where you pump more than you would do under an average day use. You peak, you use more, about 1.5 times more. And that would be 33.5. That meets the emergency supply goal. But this supply would only be for 243 days. That's a significant period of time, though. And so it should be considered as being sufficient to bridge the gap if we have an outage of the Rio Grande. Couple of things. This is in North Webb County. Yes, North Webb County. It's just south, if you will, of the Dimmitt County line. And I've got a graphic that Mike helped us put together that shows where these groundwater alternatives are looked at. About 40 miles away by the crow flying, but 47 miles of pipeline is probably going to be needed. We will also need to look at, if this is an alternative that the city wants to pursue further, there will need to be additional investigations, some field work that need to be done to verify the findings. Mike, did I leave anything out?
Yeah, and I apologize for my casual appearance. I'm in Wink, Texas.
I meant to mention that. I meant to mention Mike, the drilling rig.
I apologize, but the only thing I'd like to add on the Carrizo is that it's very resilient and doesn't respond rapidly to drought. We call it a drought-resistant aquifer because it stores so much water. it's just very able to resist drought. So it's very reliable even during drought times.
Right. Good. Very good point. And as we talk about more of these groundwater projects, particularly in the Carrizo, that point applies. Next slide, please. Brackish groundwater exists, and Mike can help with this as well, but brackish groundwater exists in Webb County and throughout the, even within the city limits of Laredo itself. The Water Development Board has identified these areas, the production zones, as they call them in Webb County. However, and this is the point to take away, that even though they're close proximity, the quantity here is very limited and the quality is very poor. In fact, in most, I guess in all cases, Mike, this water supply, this brackish supply would require treatment to advanced treatment. In quantity wise, bottom line, it will not meet our emergency or supplemental water supply goals. And unless Mike has a comment on that one, I'll move on to aquifer storage and recovery. This is, if you're not familiar with it, this is a technique that came in. It's not a water supply source per se. It's a way of using the water supply that you currently have better. What that means is you take the water supply you generate on an average basis, particularly during low demand times. You take the water that your plant could develop, your water treatment plant could produce, and you take a portion of that and you store it underground. You store it in an aquifer. And then in the summertime, when you have higher water demands, you recover it. Now, it's a very simplified explanation, but that's essentially what it means. And the city, to its credit, way back when this technology was emerging, had a firm, an engineering firm, look at aquifer storage and recovery. The findings weren't very positive. There's some issues with the aquifer itself within the city limits. That thing says there, the low injection and recovery rates. That makes that type of application difficult. The water quality is a problem. And it wasn't picked up. I think it's kind of an important point. It wasn't picked up as part of the Region M water plan. So I guess our findings are that based on these prior extensive studies, ASR supply is not expected to meet either the supplemental or the emergency water supply goals. Next slide. All right, Mike can help me out with this one too. This is Mike's graphic. This is to show you, there's a lot of stuff on this slide, but the primary thing I wanted to show, these are the imported groundwater supply projects. These are outside of Webb County, and they begin with the Dimmitt County supply, which is, as the crow flies, about 70 miles, approximately 70 miles. And then a couple of projects in both Kinney County and all the way up into Valverde County. Those two supplies can actually function together. Those are about 150 miles away. And there's some trade-offs here between distance to the supplies and the volume of supply that's available. So what we're finding is the supplies that are more proximal have less quantity, but as you move out, to 70 miles to 150 miles, that quantity increases significantly. Let's show that on the next slide, if we could. Here it is, and there's Dimmitt County at 70 miles. There's Kinney County and Valverde County, both at 150 miles away. 40 million gallons a day available on an average day, continual basis from the Dimmitt County supplies. These are estimates. These are, to actually determine better what the quantities available would be. Mike and his team or whoever would have to go out and actually do field tests and look at the aquifer itself and get in to specific geographical areas. 22 MGD from Kinney County, but that can be combined with Valverde County, which is nearby. So you could add 22 to that range of 40 to 90 million gallons a day. It's fresh groundwater. It's good quality, and would not require blending. So these are the groundwater, the imported groundwater projects that we have looked at and will continue to look at, and will be thoroughly evaluated and reported on in our master plan. Mike, any comments on imported groundwater?
I don't think so. I think you covered it very well. The Kinney County, I will say this, the Kinney County project, the 22 MGD is based on as I understand it, a current permitted amount with the local groundwater conservation district. I don't know where that stands, but I know there are permits. I don't know about export permits, so that would have to be checked. Valverde County does not have a groundwater conservation district, and but obviously there are there are political and PR issues that would be involved in that water with where it comes from and the springs and things like that. Although the amount of water that Tom represents was modeled to not decrease the spring flows below their historic low at San Felipe Springs.
Good points, Mike. And just for the audience, a reminder that there's a lot of details involved in all of these alternatives. We are making this presentation is just to get them out in front of the Laredo audience, let you see what we're looking at. The report itself is going to go into more detail, but again, it's going to be at the planning level. The next steps would involve more details in terms of the actual conditions on the ground. Next slide, please. Very good. This is one that I think the city of Laredo and its staff should be proud of. This is in the Region M plan. It's a part of that. It's a Laredo reuse project where you take the treated effluent from the wastewater treatment plant, put it into the raw water supply available, and it gets treated again, don't worry. But that supply, a couple of things about it. First, it's not a significant amount of water, but it's enough to be helpful. And at the cost that we'll show in a minute, it's a logical and good thing to do. It's water conservation. It's water that would otherwise not be available to the city. It looks, the Region M plan identified bringing on this reuse project in 2 phases. One in 2040, recall that's the pivot year where additional water supply is needed over the current amount the city has. So at 3 MGD could be very significant in bridging a gap. Then another 6 MGD coming on way out there in 2060. It is cost effective. There's been some excellent planning done. It's in the Region M plan. And it's not one of those that we look at to meet our supplemental or emergency goals, but it's one we want to add. It just makes sound sense, sound water management sense to bring on this reuse project. All right, let's go to the next. What else? Oh, now this is the Rio Grande. And again, the Rio Grande is kind of the backbone of Laredo's system. So it's never out of the picture. Kirk Kennedy is very knowledgeable of the Rio Grande and its unique water rights system. Also, the city attorney one of the city attorneys, our council, is very familiar, and Ria, I'm forgetting the name, so if you want to throw that in there, I'd appreciate it. But we've talked about the Rio Grande and the need to continue to look at availability of water rights If irrigation districts or others have water rights that they want to give up, now they give them up for a price, but if that happens, then the city is very diligent about looking into that and considering the purchase of those additional water rights. All right, next slide. Okay, now we're going to shift gears a little bit. I'm going to try to work you through these slides, these graphics. These are to show you a comparison between Lake Casablanca, a surface water supply outside the Rio Grande, and groundwater projects that we've talked about. All right, also on the left-hand side is Lake Casablanca. And a very nice graphic that Gene's put together. But what I'm showing here is the distance of the supply from the treatment plant. That's that first number that he's got his hand on, that 5.2. So it's very proximal to the treatment plant. The next number, that 5.84, is very significant. That really should probably be a 6 instead of being so detailed. But that's the number of days that supply, the Lake Casablanca supply, could be made available at the emergency water supply goal amount. So 33.5 MGD can be made available from Lake Casablanca for 5.84 days, 6 days. Very limited. It might be significant. It might be something the city wants to think about, but it's costly and it's limited in the number of days it's available. The cost, the unit cost, and that's a unit cost in dollars per 1,000 gallons. Then that's $140 if you don't do any dredging. And as Tom Mounts was telling you, if you do the dredging, it's going to be at a significant amount to the cost of water. And there it is, $188 per 1,000 gallons for that 6 days of use. All right, let's go over and look at the groundwater supply, starting with North Webb County. Again, it's 40 miles away, but all these are as the crow flies. The cost of getting that North Webb County water to the Laredo system, to the north side of the Laredo system. And let me make an aside and make a point here that this groundwater, all three of them, are coming into the northern part of the Laredo system. And the work that Charles is doing, we'll be looking at how to, that western loop that he talked about, that project can be used in part to bring these supplies down into the southern part of the city, the eastern part. And that's going to have a price tag on it. So when we look at these numbers, they're not the total number, but they're an indication of what a comparative between the water supplies groundwater supplies that we've been looking at. 243, that is the number of days that the North Webb County supply could be used at 33.5 MGD. All right, if you move up, and this is the trade-off we were talking about, 70 miles away is Dimmitt County. The cost jumps up a bit, $3.76 more or less. But the availability to meet that the emergency water supply goal of 33.5 is 365 days a year. So Dimmitt County and Webb County, to some extent, both help with the meet the emergency water supply goal, and they also meet the supplemental goal. Finally, Valverde County, that's the 150-mile bar there. The price tag goes up significantly, $4.56, 365 days though, and that's simply because it provides a significant supply of water. Let me say something about the Valverde and to some extent the Dimmitt County, but certainly the Valverde supply, there is an opportunity for regionalization, working with others that may need water along the route from Valverde County to the city of Laredo, such as Eagle Pass and others. I think that's what I wanted to say on that slide. I hope I didn't confuse folks too much. This slide is the same slide again, but I wanted to show the advantages of the South Laredo reuse project, phase 1 and phase 2. You see the price tag is pretty low. That it's close at hand, of course, at the wastewater treatment plant. You have to get it from the wastewater treatment plant to the water treatment plant. And the cost in 2060 goes up fairly significantly, and that'll be discussed in the report when we get to it. Let's see. I think, is there another slide, or are we transit? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, there is. Very important slide, actually. This one shows that there are other factors besides cost, besides just meeting the water supply goals, that we need to look at: the reliability, sustainability, the environmental concerns, water rights, property acquisition, contract requirements, and public accessibility, or public acceptability, I should say. And so all of those need to be looked at. This is a proposal that I put together. We will be going through this with Arturo and his staff and looking at the various water supply options. You can see there's a primary set that we just discussed, as well as some of the secondary sets, or secondary alternatives, as I've called them, which we'll also look at. Don't have as much detail on those, but we do want to weigh them out in terms of all of the evaluation criteria that we want to use. I think with that, and we'll be doing that, and we'll have the results of that process, that work effort in the report. Probably by the time of the next town hall, we'll have a better handle on that type of information. But I think with that, Gene, I may be done. Let's see. Next slide. I am.
You got 4 slides left, Tom.
I've got what?
About 4 slides left.
Oh, wait a minute. No, yes, but I'm going to stop talking. I'm done. And I want to introduce a very important member of our team. Lots of experience in dealing with water issues and water investments, being able to project what's needed to have a sustainable, robust water system. And that's Lisa Latu. And Lisa, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks, everyone. We've given you a lot of great and detailed information about the current state of the City of Laredo water system, as well as some of the things that we're looking at for the future. One of the most important things is, of course, that all of these projects have a cost and can't be immediately deployed to help us out. So the City of Laredo Utilities Department has been developing and implementing projects to replace old infrastructure and bring water and wastewater services to new development for years in the City of Laredo. So the next piece of our master plan project is to assist with that by sorting through the projects that have already been identified, looking at new projects and new needs from the water model, as well as these future and emergency water sources, to assign a deadline and a cost for each of these projects, to help judge the impacts and the benefits, and to pick the best projects for the best price and design a sequence for the next 20 years worth of work. This allows opportunities to pursue financing, different loans or grants or partnerships, and continue the system today as we prepare for the growth that we're expecting. The next slide is more about this, that is in essence what a capital improvement plan is, a path for implementing projects towards our goals. Again, reviewing the existing and current and previously planned projects, new and alternative projects, the future growth and the needs, and most importantly, keeping track of the costs, helping to manage the spend rates and the deadlines for getting these projects into place. This next slide is a little graphic to just sort of sum up some of the projects that are already planned for the next 5 years, about $126 million already. It's split almost $70 million for supply and treatment, and then the remainder, the $57 million for water line projects, new repairs, new lines, and other projects like that. Um, and this is some of the projects that are already ongoing that you might be familiar with. El Pico, of course, and the Lion Street Booster Station. I think the groundwater storage tank demolition and replacement there is kicking off. Downtown water line replacements, the outer loop project that Charles had mentioned, and other improvements at other facilities and neighborhoods across Laredo. And this is probably a test for me to see if I can say Cuatro Vientos, Northwest, the East Quarter, Del Mar, and the airport areas. I think as a reminder, we're asking you to hold any questions that you might have for the end of the presentation. So this might be a good time to make a note for yourself or drop them into the Q&A or the chat portion. And we're going to take a breath and bring up the wastewater team. So thank you, Jean or Hector.
Thanks, Lisa, and thanks everybody on the LAN team and staff that has participated on the water side. And again, as Russ had said earlier, this is an integrated wastewater master plan. We're looking at a lot of things, and of course, once you use the water, you got to get rid of the water that you used, and so that's the wastewater side. So what we're going to do for just a second, if this were a live town hall, we'd all kind of just stretch out a little bit and get ourselves back in the groove here and get ready for round two, which is the wastewater side. And that's going to be led by the guys over at Ardura, who have been diligently working on this since January of this year. They started the wastewater master plan side of it a little after the water folks did. So they're coming in hot and heavy, getting ready to kind of meet up with us so that we can have this full project submitted to the city later this fall. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Hector Pena with Ardura. He's going to be leading the presentation for the wastewater master plan. Hector, it's all yours.
Appreciate it, Gene. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Hector Pena. I am with Ardura, and like Gene said, we're leading the wastewater master plan efforts for the city. So to start, I'd like to provide an overview of the integrated wastewater master plan and what its objectives are, provide a review of our progress to date, and also an overview of the city's existing wastewater system. So on to the next slide. So the objectives of the wastewater master plan are: one, we're going to evaluate the capacity of the existing wastewater collection system under current conditions. So that means for the current population, but also for the future projected growth scenarios, which go through 2070, so 50 years from when the master plan was started. Second, we aim to develop sustainable infrastructure for long-term growth. We're developing alternatives that will identify opportunities and plan the infrastructure that's going to serve the city's long-term development, again, all the way through 2070. And third, we aim to provide the city with a roadmap for resilient long-term water treatment. We're providing a capital improvement program, or a CIP, for the next 50 years that the city will or can implement for a reliable wastewater collection system. Again, that's going to serve the anticipated future population. So just as a background here, the wastewater collection process, here's a graphic which we actually saw earlier during LAN's water supply part of the presentation. However, this graphic's been updated to include the wastewater portion, which we now see on the right half of the graphic. So after the water is sent down the drains and toilets from the homes and businesses here from the middle of the graphic here, it enters a collection system, which is represented here by the green pipes. Now, the collection system consists of gravity-enforced mains, manholes, and lift stations that send all this dirty water that's collected from homes and businesses and take it into the wastewater treatment plants to be treated. So after treatment, the water can either be safely released back into the river, or as shown here with the purple pipe here, could be reused as non-potable water. Go to the next slide, please. All right. So Here is a wastewater system overview. Here on the right side, we've got a map showing the city's actual existing wastewater system. The city's collection system is made up of approximately 900 miles of sewer lines. Now, most of these 900 miles are gravity lines, which are represented by the green lines here on the map on the right. But there are also force mains which are a bit harder to see, but they're still shown on this map in red. So to help visualize the amount of pipe, if this map doesn't do that already, if we were to line up these 900 miles of pipe that make up the collection system, it would be equivalent to the driving distance from Laredo to Kansas City, Missouri. So we decided to throw that fact in there, just to put that into perspective, how complex the system is, how much pipe there is underground, and that we don't typically see, right? But these 900 miles of pipe is what the city constantly maintains, and is to be able to keep the system operational. So these 900 miles of pipes, which they range from 4 inches all the way to 54 inches. They, as mentioned earlier, they collect the wastewater from every single home and business. Then the wastewater travels mostly downhill by gravity until it reaches the low point in the system. As we can see in this graphic here, there's on these low points in the system, that's where a lift station is installed, so that at these low points, then the flow can be pumped or lifted to higher ground, so that it can again flow downhill through the collection system and eventually make its way into one of the wastewater treatment plants. So there are 71 of these lift stations throughout the city. They were on the previous slide, they were represented by the, I think there were red dots on the map, but yeah, right there. So there are also 13,000 manholes in the system, which are connecting all these green pipes that were shown on the map. But we're not showing the manholes in the map anyways, but just another one that's still part of the collection system. And finally, the city owns and operates 6 wastewater treatment plants that were shown in the map, in the previous map circled in blue. The design treatment capacity of all these, there you go, so again, the wastewater treatment plants are shown in blue. And the design treatment capacity of all 6 wastewater treatment plants combined is approximately 35 million gallons per day, or MGD. Again, this is the capacity combined, but the actual flow that they treat, which is the average daily flow for all 6 wastewater treatment plants combined, is approximately 19 MGD, or 19 million gallons per day. All right. So we thought it would be good to show what the typical treatment process is that the city uses in their plans. So the first component here shown on the left side of the graphic is the influent lift station. The wastewater from the collection system that I just described enters a plant and is discharged into a tank that's below ground. And from here, it is pumped into the first process, which is called the pre-treatment, which consists of screening and grit removal. And the process, and I guess the purpose of this process is to remove solids. So screens, which go first, are there to capture and remove large objects like wipes and plastics. And the grit removal removes all the, I guess, finer material like sand or gravel that can make its way into that process. So all of these solids that are removed here are taken to a landfill for disposal. The next step in the process is called the secondary or biological treatment, which is labeled here as the aeration basin here in green. Yep. So here, activated sludge or the good microorganisms are introduced, and also air is pumped into the wastewater to feed these microorganisms so that they can eat the pollutants and that way they can achieve biodegradation. So the next step is it's called the final or secondary clarifiers. These are circular tanks that have a mechanism inside them which rotate slowly to help the solids still in the wastewater settle to the bottom of the tank, which are then removed for processing. And the last step on the treatment process is disinfection. So this can be accomplished using chlorine, ozone, or UV light. And after disinfection, the water can be safely either released back into the river, as shown here on this graphic, as non-potable water, or could be reused for plant operations as well, or again, as mentioned earlier, could be sold as non-potable water for irrigation or industrial usage. So here we have aerial images of the 6 wastewater treatment plants that the city owns and operates that I mentioned in the previous slides. On the top left, we've got Zacate, which is located by the International Bridge number 2. Then we have South Laredo, which is behind the Santa Fe subdivision by Zapata Highway. Then on the top right, we've got North Laredo, which is on Shiloh, close to Loop 20. Down at the left, we've got Unitech, which is located in mile marker 13, and that serves an industrial area. Then we've got Laredo, Colombia, which also serves an industrial area by the Laredo, Colombia International Bridge. And finally, we've got Peñitas, which is in Mines Road. All right, so a couple of slides ago, I talked about the combined design capacities and average flows for the 6 wastewater treatment plants. So here we have on this slide, we have the 50-year projections to determine what capacity would be needed by 2070, which is the long-term scenario. So on the left side of the graph for 2020, we have the current approximate population of 250,000, which may be a bit more now, but that's an approximate. And again, as mentioned earlier, the combined average daily flow of the 6 wastewater treatment plants is approximately 19 MGD, as shown there in green or yellow. And then the combined capacity of the 6 wastewater treatment plants is 35 MGD. Then on the right side, we have the long-term projections again for 2070. And as LAN mentioned earlier, the population for the city of Laredo is estimated to be over 600,000 by 2070. So as the population increases, the wastewater that is generated will obviously also increase. So it's actually estimated that the average daily flow that go into the wastewater treatment plants will be around 46 MGD by 2070. So we need to figure out how much treatment capacity is required by 2070 to treat this 46 MGD, and we go by the TCEQ rules, which specific TCEQ rule states that whenever a wastewater treatment plant reaches 75% capacity of its 75% capacity for 3 consecutive months, then the city needs to start the design and planning for the expansion of wastewater treatment plants. So following this rule, and in order to treat again the 46 MGD as it's currently estimated for 2070, we would need to add 26 MGD in treatment capacity to get us to 61 MGD. So just to figure out a rough cost estimate of what would be needed to add the additional treatment capacity, we're using an average cost of between $8 to $10 per gallon of treatment capacity. So adding the 26 MGD to get us to 61 would cost between $208 and $260 million to meet the required capacity that's estimated for 2070. So these are the costs to that treatment capacity alone. Again, just doesn't include any upgrades to the collection system. Again, I said there were rough estimates because we're still, as we'll see on the next slide, we're still not finalized with the wastewater projections. So these are kind of early estimates, but it's a good idea of where we might be once we complete the tasks. And on this slide, we've got a diagram that shows our approach or the process of how we're accomplishing the objectives that I talked about initially. It also shows where we are in the process. So I covered the initial steps of the wastewater master plan, which are highlighted here in orange. The first step I covered part of the information that was collected from the city for the existing collection system and the treatment facilities. That also included the current wastewater collection model, which was collection system model, which was done in 2015. And then I touched at a high level about how we reviewed the design criteria and the level of service for the existing facility. So the next couple of steps that we show here below that in parallel is where we are currently in the process. And I'm going to allow Nacho Hinojosa from our Laredo office to cover those steps and then what's next in the wastewater master plan.
Thank you, Hector. Thank you for the introduction, and also want to thank Gene's team for allowing me to use my high school headshot for this presentation here today. It's a much better version of me than my current version. But anyways,
not sure we gave you special treatment, sir.
Thank you very much. So as Hector mentioned, I'm going to be covering the next where we are at today in the master plan. And we're running two sort of parallel trains there with the wastewater flow projections and the wastewater collection system analysis and asset management component of this. And on top of those two items, I'll also be touching on the existing capital improvement plan for the city of Laredo. So next slide. So as I mentioned, one of the things that we're going to cover is the flow projections or the flow determination. And the three main things that we want to get out of this is, first and foremost, we want to set a baseline condition of the existing flow. So the amount of wastewater that's coming from our businesses and homes into the wastewater treatment plants today. And then we're going to take the population projections of the Region M plan and other tools to project these flows across 5 different planning horizons across 2030, 2040, 50, 60, and 2070, right? Essentially every decade. And then we will use these flow projections to develop a 50-year plan for the city of Laredo, which will include alternatives and scenarios of how the wastewater system will build out in this period of time, right? And as well as scenarios, we'll have a capital improvement plan that'll be attached to those scenarios, right? And the city will be implementing this capital improvement plan as they go on in each decade. So next slide, please. So again, we want to break this down into the flow determination to two different types, right? The existing, what are we seeing today? So we first started by identifying the existing sewer sheds and subbasins. So what I mean by that is represented in the graph in the right side here. We have broken down the sewer sheds into, and we've color coded them, right? So what is represented here is, for example, the Zacate Creek wastewater treatment plant sewer shed is represented in yellow. What that means is, for example, if you live in Mines Road or up in La Bota Ranch, and you flush the toilet, your wastewater will travel all the way to bridge number 2, right next to bridge number 2, to the Zacate Creek wastewater treatment plant. On the other side, for example, if you live in Lakeside or if you're around Lake Casablanca, your wastewater will actually travel all the way to Santa Fe or their South Zapata Highway, right? So it just gives you a perspective of the system itself. So once we identified the sewer sheds and the subbasins, we then developed what we call an average daily dry weather flow, so no rain. And we developed this dry weather flow for the entire city by the sewer shed basins, which are shown in the graph on the right, and per capita, which means every 100 residents. And the reason why we mention no rain is because when we have rain events, there's something called I&I, right? Inflow and infiltration. We have rain that infiltrates into our wastewater collection system through manholes and pipes. So we want to remove that flow and actually just what we flush down the toilet, what we use to shower, what goes down our sinks. And then we took that average dry weather flow, and then we developed what we call a gallon per capita per day and calculated these for the 3 main service areas of the city of Laredo. And again, this is existing. And why I say 3 main service areas is everything is in the collection system. is Zacate, North Laredo, and South Laredo, sort of in the vicinity. And then we have 3 isolated systems, which is Laredo, Colombia, Peñitas, and Unitec, and mile marker 13. So for existing, we're not incorporated into the system, but as we build out, we will tie in those isolated systems. So now we'll cover the future flow projections. As Hector mentioned, we are currently in the process of having these projections. So as I mentioned, a few of the considerations or tools that we're going to use is, for example, the future land use data that we receive from the planning department, and then the population projections from the Region M study. We also use the Metropolitan Transportation Plan and major infrastructure projects such as the Outer Loop, the Charles-Ruthinger Road, the Sports Complex, Los Presidentes Avenue extension. So why it's important to know all that and use these tools is because everything's shown in green, right? That's the ETJ. So that's unincorporated areas of the city. And eventually the system is going to grow out, and the city's going to grow, and the system has to grow with that, right? So it's important to know these sort of catalytic type of projects so that we can provide the correct infrastructure in the different parts of the city, right, as the city develops and grows. And again, what we want to take out of this, once we have those future flows, we'll develop alternative scenarios for the 50-year plan and a capital improvement plan that goes tied along with those scenarios. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, there's sort of 2 parallel trains here. We're also, not only are we looking at the flow projections, but we're also looking at what we have today. So we're doing a wastewater collection system and asset management portion, right, for this master plan. And as Hector has mentioned, the graphic on the right is your green pipe. That's all your sewer system there in the city of Laredo. The red dots are your lift stations. And in red, dark red lines, you have your force mains, I'm sorry. So what do we want to take out of this portion of the master plan, right? We want to first summarize the current assets and determine the life expectancy of these assets. Then we want to develop renewal costs for the current assets and use those costs to develop a long-term CIP for the city, right? When we're talking about renewal. Next slide, please. And this slide right here is one of the many iterations that we're going through as we conduct this analysis of the system, right? And what I'm showing here, I'll walk you through this. This is the gravity sewer mains from 6 inches to 24 inches, right? So from 1/2 foot all the way to 2 feet in diameter, if you can picture that. And the graph on the right is the installation area, right? So we took all that pipe and we sorted into sections. So everything installed before 1980 is shown in orange, and then installed in the 1980s, dark blue, and so on and so forth until we get to the current decade, which is 2020, right? The main takeaway from this graphic right here is that we have sort of an aging system, right? And 45% of the system was installed in the 80s or before the 1980s. So let me look around here. Maybe just Lisa, Hector, and Ria and myself were not born when most of the system was installed, right? Or at least half of the system. And then on the right side, we have the material type. And it just breaks down into 2 types, right? We broke them down into PVC, which is predominant in the wastewater collection system due to wastewater being highly corrosive, right? And it just sort of become industry standard to use green PVC pipe for wastewater collection systems. And then we have on the other side, we have verified clay pipe, which is VCP, or any other type of pipe that is still in the system, and we have 37% of that. This is another, another slide geared towards the asset management of a portion of this master plan. And as Hector mentioned earlier, I'll walk you through this as a little complicated slide. But as Hector mentioned, if we were to lay every wastewater pipe in line, we would get all the way to Kansas City, right? So right now, today, we have 30% of our system has a life expectancy of 10 years or less. So if we lay that pipe, it'll take us all the way to Austin. and those needs will grow all the way to Waco proportionally, right, by 2070. So in order to counteract that, what we need to do is we need to implement an annual renewal of 1% of the system, which is like 9 miles. And if we're doing that throughout this 50-year phase, then by 2070, we'll have a system that has all of its pipe with a life expectancy of 10 years or more, right? So the renewal needs will be less if we were to just renew the system at a 1% rate every year. This slide right here, again, geared towards asset management. To some, it may seem like 1% is a low number for renewal, and 9 miles doesn't sound like a lot. But I kind of wanted to put things in perspective for everybody here. This is a snapshot of the work orders for the wastewater collections. I want to make that clear. That doesn't include wastewater treatment, water treatment, or water distribution. But let me go through this so I can explain a little bit better. What do we call a work order, right? So when we have an odor issues or sewer pipe breaks or sewer backups, we typically call the 311 and we put in a complaint. The city assigns this to a work order, and the crews go out there and assess this work order, correct? So what we did is we went ahead and took weekly averages, monthly averages, and actually determined the number of work orders per year, right? And we translated into we did an average of 2 hours per work order. So what we're saying here is that the crews were out there every week, 53 hours a week. That's more than your 40-hour work week, just addressing work orders. That doesn't include their daily routine. So I just wanted to, again, put things into perspective for us as citizens of Laredo of what our utilities department does, and how we will work with them to implement that renewal plan, right? So on top of these issues that we have right every day with the work orders. And just before we leave this, I do want to give kudos to the water distribution and the water treatment side. We had the freeze in February, right? And they were out there, and I think they had something crazy like 270 pipe breaks, and they worked around the clock for 2 hours, or for 2 weeks to address these issues. So kudos to Arturo, Mike, and the team for addressing that situation. So now that we talked about the asset management, let's talk about the existing wastewater CIP, and Lisa touched on the water side. So on the wastewater side, what we have allocated for wastewater treatment projects, so everything inside the fence for the plants is $63.5 million. And then on the collection side, so you have your pipes, your manholes, lift stations, so on and so forth, we have $41.2 million attributed for those for that part of the wastewater system. So with a total investment of $104 million or 105. And just an example of these projects recently completed, you got South Laredo wastewater treatment plant expansion that was completed last year. The Unitech wastewater treatment improvements was completed in 2019. And you on the right side, you see the amount, or not the estimated cost, but actually the actual cost of these projects, right? And the magnitude of this investment by the utilities department and by the citizens, right? As we pay for these infrastructure improvements. And then in construction right now, we have the Eastern Chacon Interceptor. That's a big project there by Highway 83, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, there by Highway 83. And then we got the Zacate line rehab from Canal Street to Chacon. Florida Street improvements, that's downtown, right in front of RIA's office there. And then we got the Unitech Phase 1 expansion happening over there in mile marker 13. And I think this is the second to last slide, and I'll drive you through the next steps of this master plan. We've gone through the facilities inventory. We've reviewed the design criteria and level of service. We've gone through the wastewater flow projections and the wastewater collection system analysis and asset management. And now we'll be ready to jump onto the model update, right? We'll take all the information that we covered today, we'll input it into the model, and start evaluating those alternatives, and then developing an integrated CIP and master planning report for the city to implement and adopt and implement. And with that, I think I'm done. We're done here.
You're done. You did a good job there. So thanks. I'll let the old guy here take over for a second. So what we're going to do now is open up a little Q&A for everyone who's in attendance. We do have a few questions that have come in through the system, but at this point, those of you who have signed up to be attendees, and I've got some folks that are there, if you want, you can raise your hand, or you can be, and I'll recognize you and open your microphone so you can ask a question if you've got one, or if you want to put it in the chat. Right now, you're able to put it in the chat, and all of the attendees, panelists, I'm sorry, will see your question as well, and be able to answer or respond to that. So I see Ms. Aleman, you put up your hand. I'm going to go ahead and open up your microphone, allow you to talk, and you can ask your question. So Ms. Aleman, go ahead. And go ahead and unmute your microphone, and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hello?
Yes, there you go, Ms. Aleman.
Hello. Okay, I wasn't really, I mean, I guess I have several questions, but I actually wanted to speak regarding an idea that I had. I'm not sure if any of the council members are present, because to be honest, this was an attempt to get them to hear the idea, because I've reached out to my district council member a few times and I haven't heard back from him yet. But my idea is basically related to the water treatment plant. I mean, it integrates that into my idea. So if you don't mind, I have something that I wrote and I'd just like to go ahead and read it.
Yes, by all means.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so my name is Veronica Aleman, and I'm the creator of a brand new nonprofit called Karmic Quarks. Its mission is to unite humanity in all ways possible so as to truly put an end to the many social and economical issues that currently plague planet Earth. One of the biggest ideas I've had for a while now on how to get that ball rolling on achieving this mission of complete world unity, which I know that a lot of people will think is a far-fetched, impossible idea, but I don't care. Is a self-sustainable energy entertainment park that runs along a river. This park will run on natural energy using never before seen systems of cooperation between multiple energy sources that will work to support each other through the changing climates, so that there will never be a moment where energy is not being stored. These natural energy sources include, but are not limited to, solar, wind, thermal, and water power. Now, as most Laredoans know, the citizens of Laredo have a sordid history with their city officials on the topic of water plants and water parks. I myself have a change.org petition with over 3,400 signatures for a class action lawsuit against the city officials and the city water distributors over the contaminated water issues the citizens have suffered from over the past several years. However, after thinking more about it, it's more my intention to bring about real solutions that can solve these issues and not just bring about more negativity. And I really believe that this entertainment park has the potential to not only redeem all of that sordid history, but to create a new chapter in a brand new book on the history of the entire planet. A chapter that begins the story of a species that decided to put its creative intellect together in order to save themselves from themselves. I personally have plenty of ideas for specific energy harvesting techniques that can be used to run this park, but I think the best way to get the highest level of energy harvested as possible, the highest level of energy harvested as possible, is to bring together a think tank of creative energy harvesting innovators that have experience in this respective field, as well as engineers, architects, and technological companies and inventors, and all the other relevant experienced professionals and creative minds. Now, there are plenty of everyday people who have invented different systems that harvest natural energy that we can reach out to as a city to invite them to participate in the creation of the master plan this park. In conclusion, in case you're wondering how all this plays exactly into the water services plant and the wastewater treatment, well, that plays into the water power aspect of the park. There's things like hydroelectric power, hydraulic ram pumps, dams, which obviously you all know about already, impulse and reaction turbines, micro hydro systems. These are just some of the variety of water harvesting techniques that can be implemented into Laredo's water power plant. This abundance of energy created could help to support new and innovative wastewater management strategies that require machinery to help keep our water clean and abundant. They can help to support all the capital that you all were talking about, as far as, you know, the expensive plans that we have coming up, or that you have coming up, I'm sorry. And I really think that it's something that can help solve all the issues that we faced during the winter storm and the pandemic, as far as not having, you know, water and energy in some homes for a long time. So that's all that I wanted to say. I want to also thank you all. I know that you all work hard. You're working hard now to come up with these ideas, and they're great. And it's great to hear that there's a lot of projects that are already being put in place to meet the demands of the future. And I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aleman, and we appreciate your comments. And what we'll do, if you don't mind, I'm going to share with you real quick the email for masterplan@laredowater.org. If you don't mind sending those comments to us that you read to us tonight on the email, we'll make sure that they are communicated to city staff and other members of the council as well. This project or this town hall is being recorded. We are sharing it on Facebook Live, so we'll be able to go back and visit that as well. But thank you so much for your comments. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment? Anyone else would like to submit any other comments? There was one question that was asked, that I saw coming on my stream, and the question was, how much does it cost to buy water in the Rio Grande these days? Who would like to take that question? Tom Ray, Tom Mounts. I think everybody
Well, really probably defer to Ria if he's available, or Arturo, who probably keep their finger on that a little closer than we do, but it's not cheap, as I understand it. Ria, are you there, or Arturo?
Ria?
Yes, sir. It is, the cost is $3,000 per acre feet.
Yeah.
Okay, so $3,000 an acre foot. I know that the person who asked the question, I'll respond to that one on my feed as well.
That price can change based on if we're in a drought condition. It goes up.
There was a question that was submitted earlier with regards to whether or not the city of Laredo is considering drought contingencies based on the current drought conditions and the damming of the water in the Conchos in Mexico. That was a question that was asked via email probably about a week ago. Ria?
Yes, we do. We do have a drought contingency plan that is based on the Amistad Dam, where most of our water comes from, water rights. And so that conservation has 4 different levels: voluntary, mandatory, in between. And so we rely on Water Master. And as soon as the dam goes below 50%, that conservation plan is implemented. We go to council and we start enforcing it. So yes, we have a conservation plan. We are required to have by the state law to have the plan. And we are required to have updated every 5 years.
Okay. Any of our other attendees would like to ask a question? Is there anybody else out there who is maybe watching us on Facebook either at Laredo Water's Facebook or the City of Laredo's Facebook page that would like to ask a question? Okay, seeing none, that looks like we're pretty much done with the town hall for this evening. So I want to thank everybody who joined us, the attendees who registered, those who joined us on Facebook on both the city stream and the Laredo Water stream. We would like to let you all know, if we could bring up the slides, that we still have an additional 2 town halls that we're going to be having. One that will be taking place next week on the 21st from, again, at 6 o'clock. And then additionally have another one on the 28th. Right now you can go to, again, there are the 21st and the 28th. You can see those on the screen. The teams will be presenting their findings, have presentation findings tentatively late summer, and a draft of the master plan in the fall, and then ultimately an adoption of a master plan by council sometime later this year. We do have a page, laredowater.org, where you can go and sign up for a newsletter, continue to attend the town halls that are taking place, and or one thing that is very critical for those of you who are listening to us on Facebook and those who are in attendance, if you've not taken the survey yet, please take the survey that asks questions about everything from water quality and boil water notices and customer service down to what our future plans are. So please take that survey. It's a little long, but the minute you finish it, you will be automatically entered to win one of 10 4K UHD smart TVs that will be given out at the tail end of, after May, probably tail end of June is when the drawing will be held. Right now, we're getting a lot of people taking the survey, so we're hoping that that continues. And we hope that you continue to stay connected with us through our social media and the website. Again, if there are no other questions, if no one else has anything to ask, then we are, this concludes our town hall meeting for April 14th. Arturo, would you like to say something for us, please, as we close out?
Yes, I just want to thank our customers, for their patience and for the challenges that we had with COVID and with this winter freeze. We're here to serve you. We're here to take care of the water plants and the wastewater plants. We need your input so we know which direction to take our system towards and help us grow. You're part of the foundation. Your input is important. Thank you.
Absolutely true. Thank you, Arturo. And Ria and Arturo, can you give us just one brief information? I know Councilmember Martinez had asked me to share some things earlier in the week about the end of the assistance program and some things that may still be available for those either COVID or winter storm related.
Yes, the current relief program is active for this month. So if there is any assistance that's needed during this period, it'll be up until May 3rd. We're going to continue our disconnection policy or start up our disconnection policy as we normally had it before in the past. But if you are having issues and you need assistance, there is a rental and mortgage assistance program that's being handled by the Community Development Department here in the city of Laredo. So there is other assistance available that can assist our citizens and our customers. But also we will have payment plans available to assist those customers that are struggling and still have issues. We're here. Give us a call. We'll help you where we can.
Thank you, Arturo. Okay, it looks like we're done for the night. And again, thank you everyone for participating in this. Thank you to the consultant teams. Excellent job in presenting information to our citizens. A lot of us that are here tonight on the teams have a vested interest because we're citizens of Laredo and we want to see our city prosper and have a great water system along with it. So again, thank you so much. We'll see you all again next week on 21st, April, Wednesday at 6 p.m. And we'll have another one of these and hopefully we'll have the same amount of enthusiasm that's come from the community in joining us. So thank you again. Have a great night. We'll see you again next week.